All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first of hopefully a number of different presentations on Native American history in the White Bear Lake area. I'm very excited about this one to start off. First, my name is Elsa, and I am the Partnership Coordinator for the White Bear Lake Area Historical Society's Native American Education Initiative. Now, before we get started, we will do a Q&A session after Vince's presentation, so at the end of our time today. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A function you can find at the bottom, and we'll get to those at the end. So I would like to introduce you to Vincent Patton, who is the American Indian Programs Coordinator for the White Bear Lake School District. So he'll be talking about Native American education programs in the United States and White Bear Lake area specifically. So I'll hand it over to Vince.
Yes, Miss Elsa has been amazing for us today. Hey, really quick, you guys see me, and I've been here at White Bear for the last, I would say, almost a year now. I started back in March, so coming up on that year. I'm kind of interested in just knowing like who's here, right? Like I could if you would like to, could you just like I would call like a name and then could you just say who you are, like how'd you find out about this? Why, just so I kind of know and see and whatever. So like I could go start with Brad because that's number one on the top of my list there. Brad Griffith, is that what that is? Or if you want to, Brad, don't feel pressured. I know Elsa has to do a little clicking around. Oh, go ahead.
You can also use the chat function too, that we can see that.
Yeah. What was the question?
Just who you are, Mr. Brad. Like,
okay.
How'd you come
Brad
here
Griffith,
tonight?
Grew up in Birchwood and live in Centerville now.
Beautiful. Go ahead, Miss Jackie. You got your hand raised.
Hi there, Vincent. Hi, Elsa. I'm Jackie from White Bear Lake, and part of Many Faces.
Yeah, perfect.
And working with you on the Wichipi.
Yeah, it's coming. Dan Jones, or
I'm here.
yeah,
Hi,
yeah.
Vincent. I'm just Dan Jones with the White Bear Lake Area Historical Society.
Beautiful. Trisha, are you there? Maybe. I know, clicking around. Or Christopher, and go down to, or whoever.
Sorry, I'm just in the middle of cooking dinner. I'm not sure if you can hear me. This is Chris. Excited to be here, Vincent. Hoping to work with you actually in the future. I'll be working on the archaeological understanding of the White Bear Lake area for the grant, I believe. Just started working on it yesterday. So hopefully we'll be talking to you more in the future.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We got Melissa, Kyle, Judith.
I'm Melissa Whitman. I work for a couple churches in White Bear Lake. I actually know Elsa and her entire family from church work. And I also am partnered with Many Faces of White Bear Lake, and I have a Leech Laker that goes to Birch Lake. So yes. I am a parent of a child with a Native child. Yep.
Thank you. Kyle, Judith. Maybe not. That's all right. That's all right. We'll get rocking and rolling here. I'm excited.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, totally. Ms. Judith, go ahead.
Okay. I'm a senior. I live in White Bear Lake, and I heard of you through the Historical Society.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And at any point, anyone joins, feel free. Jump on in. I would love it. So I'm going to kind of go through this real quick. I am going to leave probably 20 minutes. So like cut me off at 6:30, 6:40. I'm a teacher by trade, right? And I can talk, right? We can always talk and talk and talk and talk. So I don't know when's the last time you were in school, but some of your teachers can talk and talk and talk and talk. But I don't want to just do that. So I'm not gonna be able to see any of the chat or questions. Ms. Elsa's gonna be kind of monitoring that. She could like respond, please write a question. Or if something like catches your eye really quick, just shout it out. I can stop. Like I said, I was a teacher for many years. So distractions, those are easy to work through. But I'm not gonna be able to see you because I'm in this full screen mode here. So Vince Patton, White Bear Lake. Okay, so who am I? I've been a teacher for 10. Yeah, go ahead. You got it? No, not yet. There's just a false call. That's all right. Who am I? I've been a teacher for 10 years. First, I started off as a kindergarten teacher. I went to the College of St. Scholastica. I loved my littles. After 2 years of that, I was like, I'm sick of wiping noses. So I moved to the high school and I was still wiping noses. So that's just kind of the track of being a teacher. I'm from the Oglala Sioux tribe out in South Dakota. You see on the map there, that bottom western corner of South Dakota. My reservation is very beautiful, very scenic. Badlands, if you ever heard of the Badlands, that's like my areas, a little bit south. There's a national park there, Badlands National Park there in South Dakota. If you guys ever went out to Mount Rushmore or any of that, you drove right by there. So, um, very beautiful, very strong culture, but we are very economically stressed, right? Meaning we are literally not just the poorest reservation in the United States, we are the poorest county in the United States. Oglala Lakota County is, on average, the poorest county in the United States. So my mother was a teacher. My maternal grandmother was a teacher. So I've been knee high to a grasshopper talking about schoolhouse, going to the schoolhouse, learning about the schoolhouse for my whole life, right? And I just naturally fit in there. My mother moved out here to Minnesota when I was about 6 years old, brought me and my father out there, and she became a college professor at MCTC and then Oak Ramsey for the next 25 years of her career. So she's retired now and loving the life, going back and forth from here. I'm a father too. I got two beautiful sons. I was blessed with two boys, my little hunters and fishermen. Lux is 7. Lennox is brand new, just turned 1. So he's about 13 months old right now. So he's beautiful. He's a handful. He's upstairs. You might hear him crawling around on my head eventually, but we'll just let him be with mama upstairs. So, but like I said, I'm a hunter, I'm a fisherman, I'm a cultural learner. I've been trying to do cultural things my whole life. I've taught cultural ideas. Where I was at South High School for many of those years, and in the All Nations program, teaching 120 Native kids in the high school every day, right? And started with freshmen all the way to seniors. So, but why we're here today, right? What we're doing, we're gonna get just a quick down and dirty little insight into Native American history, right? Treaties and Pratt legislation of the 70s, because those two are very important. Modern example of Indian Ed, our program, and I'll just speak about it. And then something that should be kind of on the radar for just community partners or community members like yourself, what is going to be coming up with this 2023 legislation that passed in July 1st. It passed July 1st. So I'll give you a little bit of insight into that though. So I was a social studies teacher for a long time, so I love timelines. I have a big timeline. Could put all this information out there, but I kind of condensed it. Why? Because, we only got 20 minutes. My mom, she also taught Indian education, right? Like as a class at the college level. So she literally has a whole semester of information. But I said, hey, let's fit a semester into 20 minutes. So there we go. There's some major eras, right? Not the Taylor Swift Eras tour, but major eras of Native American history, like pre-contact, right? So pre-contact before Columbus, right? Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1492. We're not really going to touch that. The one big part I want to say about pre-contact is that Native Americans were here, thriving. Columbus could not discover America. One, he never stepped foot in America, but he could not discover the new world because there was already people here, right? So that's like that fallacy that is slowly changing. Okay. The next big kind of area, right, that I like to focus on is colonial, French Indian War, the Independence War, Louisiana Purchase, right? That's a big one. Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea kind of doing that. Jefferson opening up the West with the Louisiana Purchase, right? The next big one after that is removal, right? Because everyone's out east in the 13 colonies and it's surely but slowly expanding to more and more states now because we are independent, right? Removal, Trail of Tears, the 5 civilized tribes, right? This idea of the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and this idea of the Removal Act, the first major Hitler, right? After Columbus in American history for Native Americans, right? Like our Hitler, our kind of pain, right? The leader that really inflicted a lot is our missing $20 bill, Andrew Jackson, right? Old Hickory, he was a mean guy. He was kind of witty, right? You know, he survived getting shot. He beat somebody with a stick. He did all that good stuff, but he also kicked out those 5 civilized tribes, right, out east, and really wanted to remove Native Americans, right? Hundreds upon thousands died on that trail, headed out west to Oklahoma territory. So I could say, like, after Columbus coming, right, that idea, and then Andrew Jackson was there. So the next era is kind of like this reservation era, right? So like you could think of like the U.S. Dakota War conflict, however you want to say it, that right after the Civil War, we had so many soldiers in America. Guess what? We want the soldiers, so we need to find a new enemy since we're not fighting the North and South anymore. So what do? They fought out west, right? And this idea of manifest destiny kind of came about. Treaty making, that's a big one. Battle of the Bighorn, right? We call it, the Lakota people, my tribe would call it Battle of Greasy Grass. There's lots of different ways of interpreting that. Custer, that was a fool and got himself killed, but there's retaliation for that later. After that, kind of getting into the late 1800s into the 1900s, was this allotment assimilation, boarding schools, Carlisle. This is like Indian education. This is where we're going to kind of go with. Termination era, Brown versus Board, that's like the 50s, 60s, 70s, pushing into tribal termination. And then, and for sure in this number 7 year, self-determination, that's the 72 Self-Determination Act and the Indian Education Act. And then after that, it's kind of this true sovereignty idea that came into the 90s, early 2K, and still today. So I just wanted to have fun, man. I always break this up. So I have a prize for you, okay? And I will tell you the prize. It is very valuable. I could bring it over to the History Center. I can meet you wherever. You could text me. But if you can answer this question, right? If you can answer this question, what do dogs, horses, and Indians all have in common? You can't say long hair because I'm balding, so you could get away from that one. But when you think about this, I often ask this question because it is tied directly with education and Indians and Native Americans and history. But what do dogs, horses, and Indians all have in common, right? And if you get it right, put it in the chat, all right? I will get you drum roll in your table. So one thing that we have done here at White Bear Lake this year, and I have done for many years, as I said, I'm a hunter. We harvested a buffalo, right? So we have some buffalo meat that we have given out to families. We still have a bunch, right? I mean, you get hundreds of pounds of buffalo meat off of one buffalo, but we have fed. Let's see that sheet. I think that sheet was sitting at 45 families right now that showed up to our last parent board meeting. We have a parent board meeting next week, Wednesday at the district center. That's just a little plug. But we have a bunch of that. So if you could answer that quick or correctly, we could totally get that going. So let's back up. Now we're going to go back in history. Just think about that question. I'll come back to it. I'll answer it at the end here. Okay. So anyone know this guy, Raphael Lemkin? So this is like this idea of geno and side, genocide. What's geno mean? It means a group of people or a tribe. Side means killing. Okay. So I wanted to show you this because during World War II, he was a Polish Jew and he immigrated to America, but he see what was happening in the camps, and then he invented this word. Genocide was not a word or a concept before Mr. Lemkin did this, okay? So that's what that little asterisk in the corner is that all these things happened to Native American people. All 5 of these solidify genocide. This is how Lemkin and the World Health Organization, all those UN, all those major multinational organizations, this is the 5 areas they consider genocide. Killing members of group. Native Americans were killed. Yes, they were, right? From wars to taking land, all that. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members. Yeah, I mean, getting kicked off your land, right? Deliberately affecting on group of the group conditions of life calculated to bring out physical destruction, right? Killing all the buffalo. That's always like the one I think about, right? Because we used to get everything we needed from buffalo, right? The plains tribes that had a lot of buffalo. We could get, it's like the modern day Walmart, right? You could get art supplies, you could get housing, you could get food, you could get anything, right? And you could literally live off that animal. But when they killed them all, that's inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction. Imposing measures intended to prevent births, right? So in the early 1900s, during that boarding school era where it started, Native women were often sterilized when they would be coming in and coming of age with their moon during that time because they just didn't want them to be breeding, right? And making more natives, right? And then transferring children to another group, right? I mean, that's happened all the time, right? From boarding schools to adoptions and all that. But guess what? What happened to the Native Americans cannot be considered a genocide because that stuff happened before the word genocide was invented. Crazy to think about. All right, treaty making, right? I'm cool on time here. So we're running, we're going. Treaty making. It's very important, this idea of treaties. Why? Because according to the U.S. Constitution, right, they see this treaty making process as nation to nation agreements, right? That's what a treaty is. Nation. It's like U.S. and France, China and Japan, or whatever, right? But we are domestic dependents. Later Supreme Court ruled Native Americans, but they're still considered sovereign nations. We're still like considered a France or like Chile or like Peru or like South Africa, but we're domestic dependents because our nations are within the United States borders. Okay. So of the 300 plus treaties, there's almost 400. I think it was about 20 short. Made between U.S. and tribes. Every single one was broken by the United States, right? So one of those big things, right, that was always in there, many of the treaties, especially later ones, right, into the 50s, well, starting with the 30s with Jackson and moving forward, right, 1830, moving forward, I think the last treaty signed was like 1890 or don't quote me on that, but it's at the end of the 1800s. It wasn't going into the 1900s, I don't believe. So, but most of them had this caveat: promise to educate Native children, right? Like provide healthcare, provide money for giving up your lands, give your children medicine, school, education, you know. So, what does that mean? It rolls forward this way, okay? So, this guy, kind of our third Hitler, right? This guy in the top right corner, his name is Henry H. Pratt, right? Henry H. Pratt, he wrote down, kill the Indian, save the man, right? Kill the Indian in him and save the man was delivered in 1892 during this conference, right? He was a soldier, as you can see, and he started Carlisle boarding school in Pennsylvania, right? You kind of see the effects of boarding schools, still ramifications today, right? This idea of educating or re-educating natives kind of came into this progressive era that was kind of started in the 1900s, you know, going forward to the 1920s, this progressive era of like, it's bad taste to kill Native Americans anymore. We can't just go kill them and leave them out there. So you know what? There's still a problem. They're on our land out west, even though it's the natives' land. So you know what we should do? We should take their children away for 12 years, right? Starting when you're a little 5-year-old kid until you're 18, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, right? And you're re-educated. Okay. So I'm re-educated. Can't speak your language, your hair is cut. As you guys see the transformation. Here's some pictures, right? Start, you know, sitting in perfect little lines, looking into Jesus, right? This idea of like factory work was a big one, right? Like they taught Native Americans a lot of like tactile jobs like milling or textile sewing or kind of like assembly line jobs, right? Like they wanted to do that because they're like, hey, they might not be smart enough, but if they could have a good job doing this, right? Um, the impact of this though is felt today, right? When they take your little 5-year-old baby away from you, what's a parent do, right? And they would take your baby and say, like, hey, if you do not give us your child that we know you have, right, and bring them to school, you're not going to get your check for the treaty agreement that you guys made. You have to give your child up so then you could get money, right, from the government so you could survive, right? So that's kind of a dark time in our US history, but it needs to be discussed because this is where distrust within the education system for Native people really started, right? There's a lot of sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, getting your hair cut, not being able to see your parents, right? Not knowing how they are. And then the flip side, think about the parents. You're a parent, you're taking care of your kids, but now you're not of the 10 months, 9 months of the year, you kind of get lost, right? You don't learn how to be a parent without kids around, right? And that's what the point of that is generations upon generations. These little babies here, like sitting in the desk, grew up and became parents probably, but they didn't know how to be a parent because they never seen parents. All they seen were the nuns or the priests or the soldiers that worked at these boarding schools, right? They learned those disciplinary actions. They learned that way. They never learned how to be a parent, right? So it had impact across Indian country as a whole, right? So boarding school era is still going on today. There's boarding schools still today for Native students, but I would say that according to that last little tidbit on that timeline, I said that sovereignty, right? All these boarding schools, yeah, they might have like a big ones on mine is called Red Cloud Boarding School. It's a Catholic denomination on my reservation, but it's in conjunction with the Catholic Church and the tribe now, right? So like Native people are running as the principal, as the dean, as the teachers, as the janitors, to everything, right? Native people are running the school, but still associated with the Catholic Church, right? My mother, right, went to, and her 5 brothers and sisters all went to boarding schools. Our Lady of Lourdes out there in South Dakota is in Kyle, South Dakota. That was their boarding school. It was like they would consider it a day school, but I mean, their parents, my grandparents only lived like 2 hours away, so I mean, it wasn't too bad, but they did send them out there, right? Um, but there's impacts of it. My mother, she did really wonderful. Eventually, my grandmother became a teacher at that school, right? Um, as I said, she was a teacher. My mother did very well. She got her master's and eventually her doctorate. Um, but there's other sad cases like my uncle who was molested and really hasn't recovered from that. And he is 65 years old. Right. And it's those kind of impacts that like there's these beautiful star quilts and connection and marriage and love and friendship spread across, because it wasn't just those Res kids. It was Res kids from North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Nebraska, wherever came to those schools. Right. But then there's also that kind of harsh reality of what could have happened. So that's one part. And that's where some of this distrust started from, right? But the 70s came around, right? So, on the back of the civil rights movement, right? Summer of Love in the 60s, right? And started in the 50s, late 50s, Summer of Love into the 60s, and then into the 70s, everyone, right? All the hippies wanted to be Indian anyways, right? I'm just saying. No, I'm just kidding. But 1972, right? On the backs of like the Civil Rights Act, right? And all that, they also see Native Americans like, hey, this Indian Education Act empowers parents to fund student programs, right? That the parents have to have a parent board that we have, right? At White Bear Lake, we have an APAC board, that meets once a month. Indian Education also established the office at the national level, which then basically means, guess what? They give us federal funding and state funding. It's a beautiful thing, right? So the National Advisory, right, kind of brought these federal and state funds to all grade levels, right? So that's the major difference. Okay. So there is like equity money and all that stuff coming from the federal government, but there's never been like the Office of the African American, the Office of Asian American, or Latinx American, where there's a law specifically saying, hey, there is this education and dollars set aside and this office overseeing these dollars spent, right, for other racial groups. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's equity, there's all those other things, but not specific. Okay. So it kind of goes back to that question right here. Okay. Write it down. What do dogs, horses, and Indians all have in common? They'll get education? No, I don't know. Just keep thinking about it, dropping a little bit of hints here and there. Okay. Modern day education. I want to show you guys this one real quick. Let me just actually go like this. Let me go to this slide here. Make it a little bit bigger for y'all. I know it's kind of tricky, but so this came out this July. I think it'll say up here. Yeah. Oh, sorry, wrong direction. July. Yep. Passed July 1st, 2023. Okay. So there's lots of different legislation that we do have. But some of this, right, kind of repetitive, but other stuff is kind of important. For example, let me just do this one more time, try to make it as big as possible. So it kind of is easy to read. Okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do that big. All right, here you go. So first big one I want to talk about is this: the dedicated Indian Ed coordinator. That's me. Yay! Right. If you have over 100 students, right, that see right here, then you have to have an Indian Ed coordinator. That's me. We're sitting about 155, 160, self-identified, state identified. And we'll get to that question here in a second. Next big one. Here's one coming up. And we're trying to figure this out as we speak. Okay. A district that has, right, 100 or more students, right, is going to have a culture or language class, right? So what we're doing right now is partnering with Migazi Communications. They are a Southside organization since the 70s, that kind of come in to provide lessons and language and curriculum that we give out to our middle school and high school kids. So that's always a beautiful thing, right? We're always kind of pressed because it's only me, right? I'm the only one there for Indian Ed. So oftentimes I'm just racking my brain how to get our littles, our elementaries involved, right? It's always my big thing to try to make that effort, but bandwidth so much, right? I'm dealing with federal, state, equity, and Indian Ed with my groups and all that. So we're trying. So slowly but surely. Another big one that happened is Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay. So here's one thing that really took up a lot of bandwidth for me is like I provided a lesson plan for 8,000 students at White Bear Lake this year on Indigenous Peoples Day, formerly known as Columbus Day, right? So I provided like a video conference like this, but I recorded myself, gave all the teachers K through 8, and then I did the high schools because I wasn't going to be able to do it that all. It was very specific, but K through 8, 8,000 students all got the same lesson that was about an hour long on Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it was October 10th this last year. And it could be about anything, right? What we were talking about is this identity, who is Indian, what is Indians. The elementaries went into making a cool little canoe, right? The upper grades kind of talked about Columbus and this idea of Columbian exchange and the food that was given back and forth, right? So that was cool. Like I said, lots of stuff and bandwidth always getting eaten up, right? See, I'm getting close. I know it. But then this one, okay, so this one's kind of a big one. This one's kind of 2-3 years out still, I feel like, but it's coming, right? For Native American or for any student coming up through high school or public schools, we'll have to have a quarter of Indigenous education to graduate. Okay, so this is going to be a required class that we are thinking about putting it within our ethnic studies department. in the social studies department in the high school, but they're going to have at least a quarter of this indigenous education, right? Montana does this currently. So they have a requirement that all students in Montana, white, black, brown, purple, yellow, orange, all need to have a quarter of American Indian education for every student so they could get that credit to graduate. So that one's coming 2-3 years down the line. So that's a big one. This one's kind of there. Mascots, no more mascots or Native American mascots, unless you have 95%, like the tribal schools, like up there, like, like on Red Lake, right? They're still called the Warriors and they have like a tribal mascot, right? But no more mascot. They could wear feathers. We always gift our graduates feathers, give them a blanket, give them a smudge bowl, right? Sacred tobacco, right? When they graduate, right? So it's allowed, right? See, like I said, here it is. Embedded indigenous and academic studies for ethnic studies. That's what I was kind of talking about. Teacher training, that's kind of there, whatever. So this is there. You guys could take a picture on that little sheet. But here, let me go back to this one. And then what we're doing in White Bear Lake, right? This is the last thing I got. And I'll kind of exit out of this and stop talking at y'all. Is like we're doing a lot of things with our middle school and high school and trying to get to our babies, our little seedlings, because they're the ones coming into middle school and high school, right? So we want them strong, so our program gets strong. We're doing the buffalo hunt. We did that back in November, right? We brought that buffalo into that brand new North High campus and in their brand new beautiful foods lab kitchen classroom. We got to process that buffalo down, break it down, take out the bones, get it ground up, and there we go. We made some summer sausage and some jerky with them so far, and then gifted it out. The other big things that we're trying to do is like cultural things with Migazi. Migazi Communications is huge. They come in every week, Wednesday. We go to middle school, high schools. We do that, right? And they provide, last week we were making little tobacco pouches, right? Little medicine bags. The week before that, they were painting on that buffalo skull, right? So that buffalo skull got totally all the hair off and they painted the buffalo skull doing that. Our middle schoolers, they love playing the native lacrosse, like not like the modern game lacrosse, but the traditional native game. But we're also doing wigwametry, right? A wigwam, the Ojibwe house, not a teepee, but the Ojibwe side. And there's like great, like for middle school and high school, geometry and angles, where these students make little baby dioramas, table size dioramas of a wigwam, but using those angles and geometry to make it correct, else it will not be able to be held up. It'll fall down on itself. So they're learning a lot about that, right? Moving forward, we're going to be tapping maple trees. The ice has been sketchy, so I've been kind of scared about going ice fishing. We always used to go ice fishing. We could do that, but we might save that one for like a springtime trip. And we're going to be partnering probably with Dream of Wild Health up in Hugo. That could be a very good one for our elementary, like a field trip to go out there, have the little kids go out and dig and have fun. So, oh, dang. And I'm under the time. I did good. I told you I could run. So now it's on you guys. I'm going to stop sharing here. There's my phone number if you guys need it. And questions, comments, shoot away, write them out, do whatever you need to do. I'm ready.
You should be able to use both the chat function or the Q&A function, whatever you prefer. And looks like Melissa has their hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say that Special Olympics Minnesota has a program for young elementary school of all abilities that Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe created. And it's, the idea is to get kids engaging in sports and nature. So it might be worth looking into. And I have a very good contact with Special Olympics.
Beautiful. I like that. Okay. And that's probably going to be in the springtime, you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that can be run whenever. You just have to, It's all free. Special Olympics provides all the training and everything.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
You're
It's
welcome.
always looking for our babies. I got to figure it out,
Oh, yeah.
lone man on a hill up there. So
Okay.
Is there other ones? Questions, comments, thoughts? Go ahead, Dan.
All right, I'm a political animal, Vincent. And so I have to ask the question,
Please
most
do.
legislation over historical time that has been written for indigenous groups has not been very good. So with the recent legislation that has been passed, how does the community feel about it?
Well, one major thing that came from this also doesn't say in that legislation, but there was an increase in funding. So we were sitting at on average from the state funds, um, we're only getting a third of what we're getting now. So, for example, the first 20 Native kids on our rosters, we get $20,000. That's what it used to be. But now, for the first 20 Native kids on the roster, we get 40,000. Okay. Now, back then, so that's doubled. So that's for the first 20. We have 160 kids or whatever, 152 or okay. So every student after that, okay, back in the day, it used to be about $235 per student per head after that, right? Now that number jumped up to about 475, right? Per student head. So that, I mean, the funding alone, beautiful. I mean, that and the other idea of being able to say, hey, all students are going to have to learn about Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day throughout the district all on the same day. That's massive. We don't have that. There's no other legislation that way, right? And I gotta brag a little bit because this happened in July. Most school districts couldn't get this done this year, and they're getting a little slap on the wrist. But guess what? White Bear Lake was shining bright. So yes, there's that part. The other good part that came from it is the idea that, and it's coming, is this idea that every student in high school will have to have a Native American studies class, history class one day, right, to graduate. So yes, this is like a first time, massive, awesome, beautiful. I love it. So can there be more done? I mean, yeah. I mean, but we need to take these baby steps. We haven't had an increase in funding in 25 years, right? So it's been a long time since we had increase in funding. My question to you guys, did you guys figure it out yet? Dogs, horses, and Indians, what do they have in common? Anybody got something, a thought about that one? Thank you for that question, too. That was a great one about politics. And it goes hand in hand with politics. The answer, dogs, horses, and Indians. They're all brown now. I got some light skin. The light skinned cousins. No, what other idea? So think it's political. Are Native Americans, so example, I would grab her, but she's over there. My wife, she came home one day with a wiener dog, a beautiful little dachshund wiener dog. I was like, oh, cute, whatever. And she's like, oh yeah, and you're gonna need to give me $1,400. I was like, $1,400 for this wiener dog? But that wiener dog, she's cute, little ankle biter. I love her. But if you guys ever been to Canterbury or Running Aces, where they do horse racing, right? And all those horses on the track, they're purebred, thoroughbred horses, right? Beautiful horses, right? And Indians. Okay. So Native Americans are both political and a racial group, meaning that we are both political and an ethnic racial group. So here's my Jewish card, or here's my African American card. Here is my Asian card. Here's my Latinx card, or here's my white card. But I have to, as an enrolled member, they give me a card, right? Because I'm enrolled in Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And they took my father's blood, not my mother's blood yet. And I am sitting at, I can't remember the exact thing, but it's like 147 over 256. That's my blood quantum, right? And then what that means is that, hey, if they include my mother, I think it's like 42%. If they include my mother, another 42%. So I'll be saying like 85% Native American, Patton. There's an Irish guy that kind of came up on the res, found himself a pretty little Indian girl and had babies. But the kicker, why did they do that, right? Why is there blood quantum for natives? It goes back to these treaties, right? If there are no more natives, say a full blood have a baby, that baby's full blood, but that baby marries like a black woman. The grandchild's 50%. Then that grandchild marries like an Asian lady and they have a baby. Now from half to a quarter to an eighth to a 16th to a 32nd, right? And if they can erase Native Americans, because the standard right now is quarter blood quantum, you need to be 25%. The treaties are null and void. They do not have to provide education, money. They don't have to provide those programs for Native Americans that were promised in those treaties, right? So that's the biggest reason why dogs, horses, and Indians. My Dachshund has papers saying AKC kennel certified, or those thoroughbred horses know their great great grandfather from wherever, and natives, right? But that's the federal definition. Our state definition is different. Our state definition is anybody that their grandmother, grandfather, their mother, their father, or the child was a Native American. All they have to do is check the box, say, yes, grandfather was Native American from blank, or grandmother was Native American unknown, right? So that helps us a lot with funding. So great one. That reminded me. So good. Other questions, other thoughts?
There's a question in the Q&A from Brad. Are there any plans for adult education in White Bear Lake?
Like adult Indian education?
I'm assuming that's what that means.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming. Yeah, bandwidth's always stretched, but tonight was a good night for starting this and working with Miss Elsa here with the History Center. Yeah, there's opportunities coming up here too. So yes, great question. I know Melissa had her hand up too. You go ahead, Melissa.
You kind of answered it. You were talking about like check one. So that just applies to state funding, right? So
yes.
My kiddo is 24.3% Leech Lake. So he doesn't qualify as a registered member, even though he's like 70% Indigenous. Oh, it's so crazy. But when you talk about the federal like regulation, it really at this point comes down to each individual band. Is that not correct? So
yes.
It takes decades for bands to change those requirements, but why are they not hopping on changing those requirements before all of their people are, die out?
Yeah,
it
for
blows
real,
my mind. Because
Yep.
Literally my kiddo mixes it by that much.
That much.
So, but
Yes,
even though
so
his other
that's-
side of the family would increase that by a ton, but he's not registered with the other side of his family.
Yep. And that's the kicker. So there is I know specifically within Leech Lake and all Minnesota Chippewa tribes. So that's Boys Fort, Mille Lacs, Fond du Lac, Leech Lake, White Earth. Those ones now can set their own standard, not a quarter blood quantum. But there's always like this dichotomy. There's always infighting, just like with any other group, any church group, any sports team group, any group of people always have opposing viewpoints. And the opposing viewpoints for lowering the blood quantum, saying instead of a fourth or a quarter to say like a 16th or other options, there's a lot of different options, right? Is that one, it'll take away resources, right? So like enrolled tribal members often get resource help, right? Meaning like some tribes get this thing called per cap, right? So they'll get every month, here's a check, or every Christmas holiday season, here's like a $200 check, right? So back to school, $200 check. And if they increase that number of enrolled members, those resources will go further. They'll be stretched thinner because the main revenue on reservations, especially Minnesota, is the casinos.
Right? Sure.
Yep.
So what you're saying is the young people need to step up and get in their councils so that they can change these rules. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So it's on the docket though. For Leech Lake especially. They're like
Great.
you're back. So they did that a year and a half ago because my children could be enrolled in Leech Lake or they can be enrolled in Pine Ridge. So like
Gotcha.
yeah, so like I'm kind of like we're kind of on this weird spot because that's where my fiance, my wife is from. So she could, so or they could be enrolled with me. So like we're just finding it out and waiting and feeling it out. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't mean to raise my hand again. I meant to mute it.
You can always raise your hand. Anyone could just speak up. Go ahead. Any others? Go ahead. We're always feeling it. I'm happy that you guys are here. Takes a little bit just to sign on, you know. So I do appreciate that.
And I will say, in case anyone is still thinking on questions, if you are interested in following the rest of our expert speakers that we bring in over the next couple months, keep your eye on our socials and our website, the Historical Society's website, as we'll have those posted as soon as we get them scheduled and ready. So if you like this, feel free to share with your friends and family too that this kind of thing is happening. So we'd like to reach as many people as possible. Yeah, last call for questions. Otherwise, I think we'll call it a night.
Yeah. Beautiful. Look at under time. We did it. Good job, team. That was everybody there.
And always, if you
curious
if you
I
have
had a
more
question.
questions, oh,
Yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah.
I am curious, what kind of pushback have you experienced in setting up this program in either White Bear Lake or?
Yeah. So there's been pushback. I would say it's changed. Teachers, especially older teachers that have been teaching 20 years, they have their curriculum set and whatever else. And it's kind of hard to say, hey, guess what? Today you're not teaching fractions or decimals or whatever. You're going to be teaching about Columbus. And it's not so much that they're like, no, I don't want to do that. It's just this idea of not feeling confident in their own education to teach it, right? So part of this grant with Miss Elsa here is that we're creating a PD for all our teachers, right? So they can literally take it, we'll have the lessons, we'll do collaboration with them, build that so then they can feel a little bit more confident going in because all these teachers have good hearts, but when they're set in their ways, right, and they don't know the topic, right, I wouldn't be able to teach algebra. Okay, I'm a social studies teacher, right? I'd be scared as heck. I would be learning just with them. So I can see it, but it just takes a little training, you know. So that's one big pushback, and the other stuff, there's not so much, you know. There's, I wouldn't say there's pushback from at all from like higher ups, principals, admin, or like supers or assistant supers or you know higher up admin. Very much strong support. So thank you. That's a great question. Last call. Go ahead. Shoot away. Anybody. Anybody.
Is there continuing education that's required of the teachers?
Yeah.
As far as their training is concerned? Okay.
Yeah. So there's licensing, relicensing. Every teacher has to relicense every 5 years. But Native American Studies is not one of them yet, right? It will be because of that legislation that saying, you know, Indian education for all. There'll be certain like grade levels, like high school will have to, secondary will have to take like a Native American class, right? You know, or like continuing ed hours or professional development hours, yes, but not yet. But for White Bear, there will be, you know, that's what we're doing right now with Elsa. We're always ahead of the curve. We're that good. All right.
All right. Well, if you have any other questions or if you think of anything after this program, you're more than welcome to email Vince if you caught his email there, or you can email office@whitebearhistory.org. That's our historical society and we can get you in touch with Vince if that's what you would like. Thank you all very, very much for coming to this talk this morning or this evening. And thank you, Vince, of course. This is amazing. Great start to this program. Thank you again and have a great evening, everyone.
All right. Have a great evening.